friends, it's time to adjust your bookends. For today, you're in for a real treat, it's true, as we chat to three wonderful authors who recently made their debut. So please join me in welcoming our guests today as we delve into the world that is creative writing and learn about their experiences along the way. So I'll give a warm welcome to our authors today. So we've just got a few questions. We're just going to have a nice informal chat, and then we'll also open it up to the audience afterwards if you have some burning questions or even cold questions, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I might start with you, Rebecca. You've recently published your first novel, Narky Hole and the Quest for Immortality. So what's it been like being a first-time debut writer? And you can answer that in any way you like. So just grab the question and just go with it. So grab the mic.
Thank goodness I can answer that in any way.
Yes, answer it anyway, that's fine. English would be great.
But I'm so much better at gibberish.
Oh, good.
Because everything from the 2nd of January has just been an absolute blur and a nightmare. I've been so busy doing everybody else's stuff that I just can't have time for myself to feel anything.
Wow. So it's a lot, it's been kind of overwhelming, hasn't it, the whole thing?
It has. So I would much prefer to talk about, well, a quick blurb from what it was like to get published in the first place.
Absolutely, we'd love to hear that, get that insight. Take it away.
When I first started writing, I was once again unemployed. I was a full-time carer for my mother, and I was studying interior design. So with that load on my shoulders, and I could not stop writing.
Did you find it a nice escape? Would you like to sort of enter into this other world to sort of get away from everything that was happening?
It was a necessary escape. And sometimes I was up until midnight, up to 3 a.m. in the morning, because I was just so inspired anyway, but when I thought the manuscript might have been good enough for publication, I was 3.5 years later from when I started. I was still a full-time carer for my mum. I was juggling new health problems, but at least I was working part-time. That was epic. But in order to get published, I wasn't a member of the New South Wales writers at the time, so I didn't have people or connections to talk to or get feedback about my work, or even be put in the right direction. Do we look for publishers first, or do we pitch ourselves to agents? So I had no idea, so I learnt the hard way. I knocked on the doors of as many publishers based here in Australia, and that's when the knockbacks started to begin. It was just knockback after knockback. And I could have taken it personally, but I didn't, because you can't. I didn't start doubting myself, because all my tutors from when I was studying at UNE, we both were, they said, well, you have talent. So I couldn't go that far.
Well, knockbacks are quite common. You often hear about famous authors being knocked back time and time again, and then they finally get, that breakthrough. And I should say, for those who aren't aware, UNE is University of New England, so that's where I did my PhD, and that's where you studied as well. So,
And then I attended a fantasy and science fiction weekend through New South Wales Writers. And then I discovered that the actual publishing market here in Australia for fantasy is very, very boutique. And we all know what that means.
Bit of a niche market, yeah.
So that's when I started to look for overseas possibilities. And I was very, very lucky when I found my publisher. Because not only that did I eventually get published, but throughout the editing process with them, I know that I finally found my voice.
That's wonderful, and that's the thing. I guess maybe Sophie and Kyra can talk about that too amongst your answers about just finding the right publisher that's the right fit. That can make such a big difference. But Sophie, how did you find the experience of getting this debut novel ready and then finally out?
Yeah, I really relate to a lot of what you're saying, Rebecca, because it is this completely overwhelming experience where you go from something that is so private and so intimate when you're writing and spending time with your words and spending time in your head, and then getting it out into the world, and suddenly you're a marketer, a publicist, social media influencer. You have to do all the things, and you really do have to hustle to break your book out into the market. I was really lucky because I found my publisher through being shortlisted for the Penguin Literary Prize in 2024. And that was really the first moment where it went from being something that was something I was doing for myself, and I really started writing a lot after I had my son and I wasn't working for a little while on parental leave, and I really wanted something that was just for me, something that brought me pleasure and brought me a lot of joy, so that escape the necessary escape that you talked about, Rebecca. And then when I started thinking about, well, is it something I would want to put out into the world, you start getting those little rejections and wondering, is it ever going to get anywhere? So when it was shortlisted for the prize, that was a huge confidence boost in saying there's something here.
Because you're being recognised by your peers about that actually.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think a lot of us write because we love, well, I assume most of us write because we love books, we love language, we love stories. So you're always comparing yourself to the Anne Patchetts of the world and aspiring to be like them. So it's amazing when you get those little glimmers of hope from the publisher. So I was really lucky to have that experience and to have the support of the publisher. But it is quite overwhelming when your book is out in the world. And I did cry the first time I saw it in a bookstore.
Must have felt surreal, but I must say, I forgot to say what your book was called, which is What Is Left for Us. I'll hold it up, show everybody. There we go. And I should say later on that they will be available for sale if anyone's interested in purchasing one. There you go. Okay, now Kyra, we'll talk about your experience, and of course you've written the story called The Story Fever, a historical fiction.
Thank you very much, Vicki, and thanks everyone. So yes, I can also relate to all of those. Most debut authors will use the word roller coaster about the publishing experience, and it is that. I mean, in my case, I had a 10-year path to publication from the original idea, which came when I was in a mature age university degree with this gentleman over here. Paul actually was in my class, he's come along today, thank you. So we were in class reading Henry Lawson's story, The Drover's Wife, and some of its best-known retellings, and I fancied the idea of throwing my hat into the ring of that rich literary tradition of retellings. And so I just started sort of chipping away, and the ideas were coming to me and the story was coming to me. But I had to wait a couple of years to finish my degree, and then I started working on research and fell down all the rabbit holes and went round in circles for quite a while. And until I started to devote myself to it in more of a full-time sense. So, you know, I started with like 1 or 2 days a week, and then I just wasn't making enough progress. So eventually I was going more like 4 to 5 days. And then the way I found my publisher was in 2022. I did these, through the Australian Society of Authors, you can do these 3-minute speed pitches on Zoom. Literally, you've got 3 minutes to pitch your book to 2 publishers in that case. And if they like the sound of it, then they let you send them some chapters. So I did that with 2 publishers, and one of them, they were both very positive, but one of them said yes please, and so that was a Firm Press, which is a good sized publisher that they're now part of Simon & Schuster. And I have to say that moment when I sent off my chapters, and I got a reply the very next day actually from the head of a firm, and that was the best moment of this whole experience, where, because the letters, I know it by heart. The letter, it started with "You're a fabulous writer, this is a great story, I see great potential, blah blah blah," and all these things about how I'd been mentored by Pip Williams and all of these things, the promise and then the reality. But anyway, I threw myself on the floor. I was like crying in joy. My children were like, "What's happening?" And I have to say that was the very best moment. It's pretty hard for any other moment to live up to it. After that came the hard slog of editing the novel and getting it ready for publication. And I had written 200,000 words, which is epic. And in the end, they had me chop that down to about 100,000 and then write some more material in different parts. So I ended up with like 126,000. But what I wanted to say to wrap up on that is that I think for me, writing, it is an act of creation, and the joy is in the creation. But I think publishing lets you go to a whole other dimension, which is that act of legacy. Because I think as I'm getting older as well, you start to wonder what's left of me when I'm gone. It sounds a bit morose, doesn't it? I know. But it is true. And so much of the work that we do each day just gets undone. Every single day there's nothing to show for it. And, a book was something tangible, and that meant a lot to me to do that. So
it's a lovely thought to end on. And actually, just to ask all three of you, I've got a couple of things that have come to mind. One is, how do you go with to know when to stop doing the rewrites and the redrafting? Does it drive you nuts? Like when you say, okay, that's it now, have it. You know what I mean? Like when did you know, yep, it's ready? Because I can imagine the temptation. Like I remember is it Jeffrey Smart? He used to always get in trouble from the High Court of New South Wales because they had one of his artworks on the wall, and every time he'd go to visit, he'd just retouch it because he sees something else he wanted to fix. And they said, stop. So, that's one of those aspects of that creative vibe, I suppose. So if you can kind of briefly answer that in terms of how do you stop yourself from just rewriting?
I'll just say, in that case, I was doing that at the sentence level because I'm a painful perfectionist, so I wouldn't even move on to the next sentence or paragraph until I thought I'd crafted it, which is why it took me 10 years. So I don't recommend my path. And then I did it all myself, got to a point where I thought I was happy. I had a few beta readers, and then I also got a professional manuscript assessment, and that took me through. So
that's great, because I think if you're a perfectionist, you wouldn't get anywhere, would you? Just got to write, just get it down. That's right. So
I think what I discovered through publishing is there's so many phases of editing you go through. So you have your initial draft, which you think is pretty good, and then you submit it to the publisher and you get this huge amount of feedback from them. So that's usually the structural edit stage. So that's the sort of high level, bring this character out more. We like this thing. Can you draw that out? So you have to do a lot of rewriting then. And then there's the copy editing stage, which is basically when they go through that sentence level, break every single word down. You realise you don't know how to use a comma, you don't understand grammar, and they really clean all your language up. And then you have the proofreading stage where you get someone reading it fresh and picking up typos and all the little bits and pieces or inconsistencies where you said, she's wearing a red dress here and a blue dress here. So by the time you get to that point, you've read your book about 500 times and you never want to read it again.
Must be over, yeah.
Concur with everything you're saying, Sophie. Oh my gosh. With me, with my first novel, it's just started off as it was just a novella.
Yeah.
It was only going to be sort of something that potentially the same length of Animal Farm, but then I had so many questions come forward from other writers saying, tell me about this person, but what does that mean? How does that relate back to the end? And it just got so big. Because
it's all in your head, so and it's not until someone else looks at it, they think, oh, what about that? And, oh yeah, I guess I should explain why that happened and the background of that thing. Yeah, that's right.
And of course, one of my favourite writers is Dostoevsky and Hugo. And they write about so many characters, from the paupers to the law, to the church, to their, well, I wrote about the gods, so I must be going crazy.
That's your creative streak, that's fine.
Yeah.
So we might go on to the next question. We might start with you, Sophie. If you want to just try to encapsulate, but answer this in any way you like, the central theme or themes of your novel, because it's a contemporary fiction, a family drama, I suppose, with the two sisters at the heart of it, but also lots of suspense in there as well. So just let us know a little bit about the themes of your story.
Sure. So the central premise of the novel is it's about two sisters who have grown up in Bondi, who were very close, and then something happens in their 20s that causes them to not speak.
So no spoilers, so yes.
So it goes between their 2 points of views to unravel what happened. And so really, I love stories about sisters because I don't think there's any relationship that has more love, drama, jealousy, competition, comparison built into it. So it's juicy stuff for a writer.
I have two sisters, so I
There
can
we go.
relate, yeah. Two older sisters.
That's what everyone asks me when they read the book, do you have a sister and do you get on with her? And I love my sister dearly, and that's really what I wanted to explore, is what would make you stop talking to someone who you were once really, really close to, because it was quite unfathomable to me that I wouldn't be speaking to my sister. I think the other theme that I explore is the idea of inheritance, what we inherit physically but also emotionally, going back to the legacy point as well, from our families. I was really lucky to grow up with all four of my grandparents, and then I lost them when sort of just before I was writing this book, and so that was top of mind. I dedicated the book to my grandparents, and I was really thinking through those issues of how we often have to grow up before we start thinking about our grandparents as people with their own lives and stories, and I guess some of the regret that I wasn't old enough to ask those questions when they were around.
It's almost like you forget they're humans as well.
Yeah,
you forget they used to be young.
So I think there's probably the relationships that I really wanted to explore in the book, as well as some themes around. It's a very Sydney book, so there's some themes around the sort of environmental impact of coastal erosion in Bondi as well, as a bit of a subplot. Yeah.
And Kyra, did you want to talk a bit about the central themes? And like I said, answer in any way that's comfortable for you.
So I've already mentioned that the novel, The Story Thief, it is inspired by Henry Lawson's classic Australian story, The Drover's Wife. And it fits into the tradition of Drover's Wife retelling. So in my retelling, my character Lillian is born in 1892 as the daughter of a drover, and she lives in the red dirt country of outback New South Wales. And we first meet her in the prologue as an 8-year-old little girl. And the only spoiler I'll give you is that in that opening scene, she loses her family in a tragic bushfire. And she's then sent to a convent boarding school in Sydney, which is actually Sacred Heart Rose Bay, a real school. And we next meet her as a 16-year-old when in class, in English class, she first reads Henry Lawson's story, The Drover's Wife. And based on the parallels with her memories of home, she's immediately convinced that the story must be based on her family and that her mother must have been the unnamed and unacknowledged drover's wife. So that belief sets Lillian on a path to go searching for the truth, and we follow her journey of love and loss across the backdrop of 54 years of Australian history. So Federation, women's suffrage and 2 world wars. So the themes of the novel, apart from Australian identity and history, which Henry Lawson is very much a part of, the themes are mothers and daughters and love and loss, and the power of words, and also, I guess, the healing, transformational power of art and of nature. So, yeah, that's what it's about.
And for some of you locals have mentioned some nice local landmarks, including Erraldine, the lovely Erraldine Cottage.
A lot of local
yeah.
history.
Same with Sophie's, a lot of sort of Sydney landmarks, which is kind of nice to read. And Rebecca, the central theme or themes of your fantasy or sort of magic, magic realism as well, because it's sort of set in a human world, but it's just, with the different creatures as well. Yeah.
I'm glad you picked up on the magic.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of my favourite genres. Yeah.
Here it is right here. So, it's actually a coming of age / redemption tale of the oldest cat vampire alive. A coming of age of the oldest cat.
With a very cool name.
Van 007.
Yeah. Makes you
Also
think
known
of James
as
Bond.
Snarky Hole.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
On top of that, it's a story about family and friendship. How we define them, what it means that even though you might be a part of some community, whether it be family or friends, you can still feel lonely. And the two main characters certainly do feel that. The third theme is perseverance and determination whilst living with chronic disease. My main character, Van 007, has type 1 diabetes, and Pavel, his friend, has hemophilia.
You're going to say what Pavel is? Or you want to keep that?
Pavel's a pig. Pavel's a pig with hemophilia. And both these diseases are either managed or cured via fantastical means in the book.
I was going to say, you've got such quirky elements. Explain about the cat whiskers, because I love that, what that signifies. Can we say that? Well, that's not a spoiler, is it?
No,
Yeah.
no, not at all. I hope not. I don't think so. The cat whiskers it signifies their end as in their life. With the cat vampires, the length of their age is indeterminate, and you only switch to your next life. How we their life, the 9 lives.
So
And
is
then-
that- yeah,
And it's you only switch over to your next life through illness or a mishap, or you
Yeah, but I was going to say, if you lose your whiskers, that kind of shortens or brings you to the next life. Is that what sort of shortens the
the
life?
beginning,
Yeah.
beginning of the end.
Beginning of the end. Because I was going to say, as you get older, you sprout so many whiskers. I thought maybe I'll live longer then. Geez, unlike poor Van 007.
No, well, the age can actually be indeterminate.
Ah, there you go. Because that's the quest for immortality, yeah. It's very quirky. I love all the quirky bits. Is there anything
So
else you
when
get
he
from?
starts to lose his whiskers, which is right at the very beginning of the novel, that's why he must get to Egypt
Yeah.
and become an immortal.
But even though they can be quite different books, you've got a historical fiction and contemporary fiction, even a fantasy, you do have that common theme of just family, connection, relationships, which is sort of goes right across all three. So we might start with you, Kyra. No, that's good. You let me know. Go on.
Yeah, sure, there's a few chronic diseases in there. The type 1 diabetes, and the hemophilia, but the symptoms are human realistic. But the likeness to real world people is not coincidental. Clearly that was chosen for a reason. But the struggles, particularly of type 1 diabetes, is very much my own, because I've been living with chronic disease since my mid-20s. And finally, the passage of time,
Yeah.
which reflects, totally leads us back to the oldest cat vampire in the world. And his struggle to adapt and change to reach his goal in the most absurd circumstances that I could possibly think up. because we as humans indeed probably created the chicken and the egg conundrum in the first place, which is a bit of a quote from my first chapter.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for that. All right, so a last question, and if you could, I might start with you, Kyra. If you could ask the ABC to do one thing to support emerging authors, what would it be?
All right. Well, I'll start with a thank you to the ABC because I've been lucky enough to do quite a bit of book touring in regional Australia with my novel, like to over the Blue Mountains. Nobody seems to go past the Blue Mountains, but into the Central West.
Bit hard with the Victoria Pass at the moment, but anyway.
Yeah, that's right, that's true. And also down into regional Victoria and places like that. And when I've gone on these travels, I've been on the local ABC stations quite a bit actually, and they're always happy to support library events and bookshop events. So yeah, I've had some really, that's been wonderful support, I think. And they've pointed out to me too that, as authors, like we're trying so hard to help promote our books, and my background was in marketing, so that part comes quite naturally. But apparently radio actually has one of the biggest impacts on people. So it is great if the ABC can feature authors and debut authors. They could have a little once a month thing for debut authors, perhaps. And I know they've got the television program. What's it called, the book club? And perhaps. Obviously, they want to see some big names on there generally, but perhaps every quarter or something they could feature a panel of debut authors.
Yeah, because there's a couple of, especially on ABC Radio National, they have the book show with Claire Nichols, which is on every Monday now at 10 a.m. and repeated Saturday 9 p.m. And they also have the bookshelf with Kate Evans and Darcy McCulloch, which is on Saturdays at 10 a.m. and then repeats Monday at 11 p.m. and Fridays at 10 a.m. But that's one thing that the ABC does well, doesn't it, in terms of the regional coverage and supporting regional communities. And of course with radio, you can multitask. Have it on in the car or when in your earphones while you're doing, stuff around the house. I mean, it's a bit hard to look at things when you're driving. You shouldn't really have your eyes on the screen, So that's radio's fantastic. Yes, that's a great idea. Yeah.
I'm going to ask for two things. I'm going to be
wonderful.
greedy.
Okay, let's write these down.
So, picking up what Kyra said, I think that emphasis on Australian authors in particular is what is so special about the ABC, that focus on the local, because it's so hard to break out, and we're not just competing with Australian authors, we're competing with huge international authors.
Yeah.
And there isn't as much attention for Australian authors, so that's what is really wonderful when you can elevate those voices. And what's funny is I went to a book club a few weeks ago, and one of the questions I had was, did you feel a bit embarrassed to set your book in Australia? Did you ever regret that?
That's one of the things I loved about it, just to read about your local audience.
Yeah,
that's good.
I don't think you'd ever get that question if you were setting a book in New York or London or Paris, and I'm so proud that my book is very distinctly Australian, and in particular Bondi. So yes, I think that's what ABC brings out. And then my second request, which is what the ABC does beautifully as well, is you can't have writers without readers, and I think the way the ABC creates these conversations around books through shows creates such a vibrant culture.
Yeah.
And what I've seen in particular for my son, who's now 7, but seeing how he loves listening to audio stories and podcasts through the ABC Listen apps, and he is creating pictures in his head through words and storytelling, and that's what he was doing before he was reading. So supporting that younger generation in loving stories, loving reading, loving books is my number one request.
That's wonderful. Did you want to add something about that, Kyra, with the Australians?
Yeah, cultural cringe is obviously what that was being referred to, and it's interesting because that's actually one of the themes in my novel as well, because even though my story, it's kind of 2 books in one, because it's Lillian's fictional journey of love and loss, but it's also a story of what I like to describe as Australia's coming of age in art and in literature and as a former British colony, all of which occurred in the years from 1900 through the 50s, because it was a very different Australia at the end of that. And, in historical novels, obviously historical novels are a blend of fact and fiction, and you have real historical events. But what I really wanted to do in my book was dial that up a notch and feature as many real people and places as I could. And so my novel is principally set in Sydney. As I said, Lillian goes to this to the Sacred Heart College in Rose Bay, or it's Kincoppel Rose Bay it is now. She then goes on to the Women's College at Sydney University, and one more spoiler, she then goes on to become a teacher at Ravenswood here. And so I deliberately featured a lot of local history like Erraldine, Killarney Castle, etc. And I actually, I was not happy when my own publisher actually was trying to get me to pull back on some of the North Shore settings. Ironically, she comes from Bondi. So we have that Sydney East-West thing. And I really insisted upon that staying because I said, we like to see our own stories in print. And, she sometimes, to be honest, she would refer to it as a local story. And I said, well, every story is local in its own way, whether it's set in New York or St. Petersburg or London, why shouldn't it be local to this area? So I actively fought against cultural cringe, so yeah.
That's great. I got a buzz out of, like I said, just seeing those, reading about those local sites like the QVB and the early tea houses and all that kind of stuff. It was wonderful. So back to you, Rebecca, now. So what's one thing? Yeah.
The ideas for the ABC.
Yeah, about emerging authors, supporting them.
My ideas are already been spoken about.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well,
I have nothing more to add except bring back the book club.
I know, Jennifer Birds, that was such a good program, hey? They haven't really had anything like that since, have they? I don't think they have, but the radio ones are great, And I think it's great if they can feature the sort of more debut authors. But you're right, they have a lot of the more well-known ones. And I guess if you're also already a celebrity, you sort of get a bit more traction, don't you, in terms of getting something published or getting that sort of publicity. So you're up against it, that's for sure, as a new author. But I wanted just to ask too, before we open it up to the audience for some questions, we're nearly there. Can I wait? Just a couple of, beautiful. I'm glad you didn't go the other finger, that's good. Okay, just being cheeky. Can I just ask each of you, just to give everyone an idea of sort of the time that goes into putting a book together, from conception to publication, how long? Like you were saying, Kyra, be about 10 years, yeah? And for you, what about for you, Sophie, from
the first word to publication, it was about 4.5 years.
Wow, okay. And Rebecca, for you?
Probably roughly 5.
Yeah, so
I came back with the ideas from my travels.
Wow.
To Turkey and Italy.
Yeah.
And Turkey is mentioned.
And that's is that what inspired your story? Just being, because I often wonder what, like you said, from the writing class you were doing, sort of what kind of gets you in and to start your story. So that was your travels. Okay. Yeah. And we already knew from you with your sisters and what could lead to an estrangement, you just from the drover's wife, just sort of getting that idea.
And I think it was. So we've already established I'm a slow coach, but so it was 10 years from idea to publication. But in many ways, it's a lifetime to write a novel because you're gathering experience. I think when I was a child, like everyone did, I was a voracious reader, and as a teenager I dreamt of becoming a novelist, but I had very sensible parents who steered me into a commerce degree instead, and I had a good 10-year career in that.
Is there anything wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it, and I found my way to marketing, which was like the humanities part of the business world. But it was about gathering ideas and sensibility, and then it was actually when my daughter was first born and my husband's job got us moved to Melbourne that I then took the chance to return to university instead of going back to work, and started studying English and later creative writing, all with a view to publishing a novel. So there was another 10 years before the 10 years. Yeah. So it's not something to be embarked upon lightly. everyone will have a long road story.
I think it's just fascinating to hear like how long it takes for authors, and it can just be different for everyone. So what I'll do, I'll channel my inner Oprah and Phil Donahue. Remember them? Well, you might remember them. My dad used to my parents were Italian. My dad would refer to Phil Donahue as, do you remember him on TV? He's the man with the white hair. That was him. And I always laugh because we'd watch Seinfeld, but he'd always refer to it as Jerry. It's very quirky. Okay, I'm going to walk around now, and if you have some questions, just pop up your hand.